Bam. Recording in progress. That means we're starting. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to Getting the Record Straight. I'm Rob Bell, your host as usual, although kind of been out of circulation for a few weeks. Usually I have some artwork behind me and some other nomenclature, and that's all downstairs, and in the basement I'm doing some having some renovations done to the house. So what was a makeshift studio anyway is now a double makeshift whatever, but at least if things don't go well, I can just kind of fall back on my bed here and relax. But anyway, this is Getting the Record Straight, where I usually do one of two shows, either the Truth to Power segment or the Black Rock and Soul segment, which is typically an arts oriented segment, or the Truth to Power, which is typically political, social justice. But we're fortunate this time that I think I can merge both of them with the brother, my guest here, Euware Osayande, who kind of ran into about 4 or 5 months ago doing his thing. It was after COVID had kind of tamped down a little bit, and was able to get out. And who do I see but Euware, who is a poet, an essayist, publisher. This is going to be long, by the way. Change agent, social justice activist, and an anti-oppression educator. And none of that is hyperbole. This is all, this brother does all of this stuff. And it was really good seeing you, man. A few months ago, he's with Ruth Naomi Floyd, and who I had interviewed, and also, and I'm blanking out as usual on the guitarist who I love dearly and interviewed here. And but anyway, it was really great seeing you. As I said, so let me welcome you and introduce you to everybody. Euware Osayande. When I was doing, reading up on you, it said that you were born in Camden, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but we're going to claim him for Philly. I don't know if Philly deserves it. I often say during many of these interviews that Philly has, so many treasures.
Yeah.
Treasures,
the city does.
Who are
absolutely
just fantastic. And I wasn't sure whether I could actually say that. I mean, claim you, but we're going to do it because you're not living in Philly now, right?
No, I don't live in Philly presently, but I gave Philly about 30 years of
okay.
Of my
Well,
life,
that's what's up. But anyway, welcome, man, and just let me read a little bit more of your bio. Euware has authored over 10 books, 3 of which, one's called Who's America, another new and selected poems, and then also a book entitled Commemorating King, Speeches Honoring the Civil Rights Movement. In 2012, Euware edited and published Stand Our Ground, Poems for Trayvon Martin and Marissa Alexander. And it has your most recent book as Black Phoenix Uprising. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so again, welcome, Euware. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and spend some time.
It's nice to see you again after all these years. We both were, hanging out with folks like Terry Johnson, acting up with his Real News publication. But it's great. This is great.
Doing some real groundwork, though. I mean, literally and figuratively, dropping this off at the office and running and
that's right,
working and family and all that good stuff, man. It was crazy, but just fantastic times. But that's a good segue, I think, into when I met you 20-some years ago, I guess it was.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. You were already into, writing, from a liberation or social activist perspective. Was that something that you evolved into, or were from the door when you started writing? Were you always writing in that mode, in that frame of mind, so to speak.
Oh, wow. So no, it's something that I would say happened to me, to be quite honest with you. I came to writing as a consequence of a life-changing event. There was a young boy in the community where I was attending college. I went to school at a small university in North Jersey called Fairleigh Dickinson University.
Oh, right.
And in the community off campus there in Teaneck, there was a young boy by the name of Philip Pinnell Jr., who was shot and killed by a white police officer in 1990. And at the time, I think I was the vice president of the Black Student Union on campus. And somehow, I don't remember how, but we were invited to go and spend time with the family. And this was soon after the murder took place. And to this day, I remember, very clearly sitting in the family's living room, as gracious as they were at the time of mourning, and just seeing the father just weeping uncontrollably the entire afternoon, just constantly saying over and over again, "I just want justice for my boy."
Was this gentleman a young kid, a student?
Yeah, he was a high school
Dickinson?
student. Yeah, no.
Oh,
He was in Teaneck, either junior high or high school. He was 14 years old.
Oh, man. Mhm.
Yeah, was playing basketball with his friends, and out of nowhere, cops roll up all the way up onto the court and draw their guns, come out, guns drawn. Philip runs, gets as far as his neighbor's backyard, and gets shot at, bullets in his back. And so, as a student organization, we were certainly, committed and concerned. We actually ended up organizing a march for justice that went from Teaneck all the way to Trenton, that brought students from as far north as Harvard, far south as Howard. We had about 500 students with us that day. And those events, at the time, there was one Black newspaper in the state of Jersey. It was called the City News. It was published out of Plainfield.
Mm-hmm.
And they had been following the case, people like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, all the folks was coming down and talking and sharing and whatnot. And I don't remember how. Oh, yes. So the publisher of that paper was present at the day of our march. And, as most of our publications are, short staff, that kind of situation. So he actually came to me and said, "Listen, we'd love to feature this story in our paper. I just don't got the staff to write it. Would you mind writing the article? Send it to me, and I'll publish it." And that began my relationship with the paper. And I would, write. I would cover the entire case. It's all there documented in the paper. And I'm entering my senior year at the college. And, after graduating, they offered me a job as a staff writer, and I had my own column called The Talking Drum Speaks. And that's out of which my company, The Talking Drum Communications, would develop. But yeah, that's how I got my start in actually, what I would call serious writing. The poetry emerged as a result of, reading the works of Hakeem Ahubuti, Amiri, of course, and Sonia Sanchez, the founders of the Black Arts Movement, just as a student, just in the library on campus. And so my relationship to poetry actually began as a reader of poetry, and my search for a sense of identity, to be very honest with you. And then had the chance, again, as a consequence of the organizing around Philip, would actually meet Baraka, at an event in Newark, where I was there as a speaker and he was there, as the featured speaker. And then, we developed a what I consider a very close relationship. Baraka would write the introduction to my first book for Africa World Press, entitled Blood Luxury. We would do different poetry events together, across New York and Jersey and such. But So yeah, that definitely, I would say that when I began to take writing seriously, it was with the intent to write about our people's struggle, and was a student as much as a teacher in that process.
That's an interesting title to your book, Blood Luxury. Can you expound on that a bit?
Well, that was the title. The title poem of that book was a poem about. I don't know if you recall, back in the 90s, there was the whole controversy about blood diamonds.
Yeah, right.
Out of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that as a metaphor, to talk just generally about, the wealth of Black people, generally speaking, worldwide, and how, our labor, has been enslaved, has been colonized, has been exploited, et cetera. And the whole issue around diamonds is just scratching at the surface of all that represents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now we have AFRICOM to kind of assist in that.
Oh.
It's. I tell people, man, I was in college in the 70s, and I shake my head talking to a lot of younger folks. My son is 42. And I say, you just couldn't tell me.
Yeah.
Like 1977, 78, 79, that we would have Black folks in particular in 2020.
Right.
Who, it's just, we're going to circle back with that.
Okay, let's please do. We must talk about that.
It's too much, please. But I was looking in some of your work. You talk about bell hooks. Did she have a particular impact on you? And,
no question. Yeah. No question. It is, if I could pinpoint 3 writers who have had a life-changing impact on me as a person, I already spoke about Baraka. Baraka taught me that the role of a poet is to be an activist, that there is no being a poet, in the tradition of Black liberation struggle and not be involved in organized struggle for our people's liberation. And embracing that, as fully as I did in my 20s, with all the vigor and bravado of a 20-something at that time in the 90s. I made a lot of mistakes, and some of those mistakes were due to the perception, that I carried as a Black man, as to what Black manhood ought to be. And it was, thankfully, Black women in my life who, confronted me, on some of the, the thinking that I carried in my effort to represent, right? Who lovingly chided me and said, "Nah, son, you got some things you need to learn yet." And they handed me, the sister handed me a book, Sisters of the Yam. And by that point, I had already began to, because I was going through some stuff in my personal life that was causing me to really, reflect on, like, all right, what kind of man are you really trying to be, And at that point, both of my sons are on the scene. I'm still in my 20s, and just trying to figure a lot of things out. And I read that book, and I think I probably read it in a single day. There was just so much. Although the book itself is Bell talking about, it's essentially a self-help book for Black women. It really helped me understand, the distinctions of realities that Black women face. That, in some certain cases, me as a Black man, I actually contribute to the problems that they, deal with. And so it was very much the kind of education that I needed. We'll go on to read everything else that, she's written practically, and, and the opportunity to go, sit and listen to her speak when she was in the area. I took it. But yes, and more than just read, like more than just read. Her writings were very much similar to the way a Christian would describe the Bible. It was formative. My understanding of who I am and what is my role and purpose on this planet was effectively challenged and changed as a consequence of reading the writings of Bell. And I wrote an essay when she passed, just out of respect for that, for who she was to me, just as a writer, and go into more detail about some of the ways and where I was in my life, at that time, and the particular challenges that I faced as a consequence of trying to live into some of the things that I was learning from her.
Who was the third person, the third writer?
Oh, the third writer would be Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
Who's that again? I'm sorry.
Yes, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He's a Kenyan writer.
Okay.
Back in the 70s, in fact,
really?
Who was one of the first and probably still considered probably the foremost Marxist writer out of Africa. Okay. He's still alive, still writing. He's got a series of biographies that he's written. I mean, we're talking about a dude who, I don't know if it was in the 70s or the 80s, but whenever Moi was in power, first came to power in Kenya, imprisoned him because of his writings. He's just staunchly anti-colonial. And just like we were saying earlier, just pointing to, the way African leadership has portrayed African people, that's all in his work. It's all in his work. And, he's the one that I would say clarified for me class struggle. I learned to be able to have a lens on Black class struggle in this country as a consequence of reading Class Struggle in Africa. He's the primary teacher for me of that.
And so when did you get hip to him? When were you made aware of his writings? While you were at Farley Dickinson?
No, that would come later. It would come as a consequence of conversations with Baraka. In his book Daggers and Javelins, he reviews Ngugi's work up to that point, and I believe that must have been published back in the 80s. Daggers and Javelins. It's a collection of essays. And reading that, like any book I would read, I would always go back in the bibliography and like whatever they're reading, I want to go read. And so, I was like, oh, this guy, I got to learn about this guy. Because at that point I was struggling with, how do I make sense of Malcolm's developing criticism of the Black leadership class, what he talked about the difference between the field Negro and the house Negro. And growing up, whether it was in Philly at the time, we had the first Black mayor. In New York, you had, the first Black mayors.
Jenkins. And
growing up in that generation, seeing that, living through that, and then realizing, well, not much has changed. Not much has changed. And then, in Philly's case, dude dropped the bomb on a whole community of Black folks. And so it's like, you end up becoming some type of shield deflecting accusations of racism that would otherwise come at someone in your position, given how you're treating Black folks. And, because I definitely can't come out of a very strong Black nationalist, thought, that again would be challenged by Black feminism along the way, Bell Hooks in particular. I was yet struggling with how do I maintain a Black nationalist positionality in the face of this kind of betrayal, of Black leadership that ascended to power as a consequence of a type of Black nationalist, approach. And so, it was first Baraka, of course, when you know his trajectory to becoming a Marxist. I was like, okay, well, what's this about? And of course I had to get over my own, I guess what would be called some type of um, essentially prejudice, because, Marx is a white cat from Europe, and, I did, deal with that. But, a lot of my work in terms of research presently is really about helping our folks begin to grapple, with a lot of that stuff. Because I've been through that, and have had to question and wrestle with those questions myself. It's clear that this is where we're living now. Like,
well, where do you stand, or where did you land as a Black Marxist?
I would consider myself. Do I go around calling myself a Marxist? No, I don't. But not because I'm opposed to Marxism, not at all. I would consider myself someone who is, definitely opposed to capitalism as an economic system. I am still in the process, honestly, of learning what socialism could mean for Black people, and understand that there are, what my research is showing me is that there are a variety of approaches that a community or a nation of folks could take with respect to alternatives to capitalism, or different types of socialism. And I am definitely devoted to that project for sure.
And I'm not so sure how important the labeling is. I'm kind of more clear on what I'm not, and what I definitely oppose. And and the great ones all had some kind of evolution and development. You mentioned Malcolm, and I know you've written some stuff on both Malcolm, and I think I mentioned King, one of the writings that you edited, was it? But I was recently watching something with Dr. Carr from Howard University, and he was talking about Malcolm using the metaphor of a burning house for the United States. And of course, King had made, I didn't know that, I knew about King's, I had never really heard Malcolm. And Malcolm had used that same statement. And since you've written about both of them, what's your view of that? I tried to pose that question to a speaker, a piece that I was watching, a virtual talk, but they seem to ignore that question. But, I just feel so strongly right now that, we're being led down a path of destruction, man. But
no, I wholeheartedly believe that we are living through, if I'm not mistaken, it was King who was concerned that he was integrating his people into a burning house.
Right, there you go.
Malcolm said, pretty clearly and earlier on that, the American dream was actually a nightmare, and that, the fire was burning, and we're the ones, getting burned. I would say that we are living in the realization of that. And sadly, the metaphor I would use is that it is akin to being frogs boiled in a pot, because many of us are so, whether we are just made so busy by the structure, we go to work, we make sure our kids get back home, we're just so busy in this life that we don't have the time to sit back and consider, what is really happening, right? Or we live in communities or, belong to institutions that for whom the answer to these problems is stuff like, we got to pray about it. It's really all we can do. And, so we're limited. Our vision is limited. Our capacity is limited. Our will is limited. Or, we're, believe that, just every 4 years, if we vote right, things will eventually get better. And so, I would definitely say that, for many of us, we're not even aware of how bad the situation has become. And even in light of, what's happening just this past week, what happened in Buffalo, what happened in Texas just the other day. This is horrific. This is absolutely horrific. And it is not a mystery, right, as to why these things are occurring. There's a clear line that goes back to the origin of this nation. You have a group of people who have organized around a conception of the Second Amendment that, seeks to protect their interest, and their interest is maintaining their possession of what are clearly ill-gotten gains, whether we're talking about the profits or whether we're talking about the property. Again, for most of our folks, we are so caught up in maintaining the system, being placed in positions by the system, and we're being sold that is progress in itself. And Malcolm and Martin, I believe, would be very concerned,
without question,
about that.
It's, one of my favorite artists, poets, you name it, Gil Scott-Heron, the late great Gil Scott-Heron, just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a whole nother discussion which I could go into, but won't. But, I remember one of his poems / songs, he kept making this statement, America is in shock. I don't remember which one it was, but it's like, now that we have normalized this, so what happened in Texas, what happened in Buffalo,
right?
What about what happened in Yemen? What happened in Libya?
Yes.
Yes. There's at least 3. I was reading a newspaper headline that said 300 soldiers or Marines from Indiana reserves had been trained at Fort. There's a base in Texas, and I'm not thinking of it now. But it's named after a Confederate general.
Oh wow!
Yeah, in Texas. I can't remember which one. Hooker. I forget which one it is.
Okay.
And they were being sent to Africa.
Wow.
And it's like, that's enough to pull your head. I mean, what?
Yes.
You mentioned vision. If you haven't seen it yet, please take time to see a documentary called The Art of the Steal. You familiar with it?
No, I'm not. No.
The Art of the Steal has to do with the Barnes Foundation.
Oh, okay.
Which is the most lucrative or wealthiest private art collection in the world. And Albert Barnes, the guy who collected it and owned it, left it to Lincoln University. They can't even put a price on it.
Wow.
Can't even put a price on it. They said it's generally estimated to be worth $25 billion.
Oh my God.
And just watch because you talk about vision, and there were Black people in political positions in Philadelphia. I mean, even if you only have half a brain, right? Just half function. You got to figure, well, at least Lincoln's going to have the greatest art program in the Western.
Exactly.
That's if I don't
Yeah.
even,
Come on.
I don't
at
even
least.
try, you know,
Yeah.
we
That's
got
yeah.
that, you know. You know, maybe being a little creative, we could do this, that, and the other. But that much, you know, we'll have people coming from Senegal, from Europe. It's now on, you know, it was in Marion, Pennsylvania. It's now on Pennsylvania, Ben Franklin Boulevard. And if there was ever a time for 25 billion for people to be mobilized and saying, hey, you know, let's tear something up if we have to.
Come on.
Keep it there.
Come on.
Didn't happen.
Oh, wow.
But you got to watch anyway.
I will.
What's up with Black politics, man? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, what do we have? You know, there's a scene, I hate to bring the Godfather into this, but there's one scene where Sonny says, man, we used to have, you know, Pop used to have like this assassin named Chank. Look at what I got now.
Yeah.
We used to have King.
Yeah.
Now, well, look at what we got.
Look at what we got now. No question.
You can't wait to get.
Yeah, no,
we got AFRICOM now.
We are in a very sad state. We are in a very sad state, and for me, again, it's bringing me back to the necessity of the development of a class analysis in our community. Yeah. You know, that is to say that you know, we have to, in addition to, I mean, and here for me is the greatest example to this in terms of our present circumstance. The greatest example to this is the cat in New York, the mayor.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a better example of someone who is an outright betrayal in his body. He embodies a betrayal of the most basic fundamental needs and aspirations of the Black community, yet won the office as a consequence of his ability to come into our community and say, hey, I'm one of you, you know, you should vote for me. I'm going to get in there and handle things on our behalf.
Euware, you know, there's a couple of people who could give him a run for his money now.
I'm sorry?
You know, a couple of people who could challenge him for that, you know, as the best example. I mean, the head of the Department of Defense is a brother, right?
Well,
you
yes,
know?
Yes, sure.
And then
sure.
the cat who was Obama's, I want to say national security advisor. I forget what he was. He was an attorney in the Army. But this cat got in front of people, a whole school student. I forget where he was. He was at a college, and he said, "Oh yeah, King would have been down with these wars we're fighting." What do you know? And wow. I think about you know, you're talking about Baraka, and when Lumumba, they moved on him, they ran up in the UN, almost turned the UN out.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
It's just, anyway. I don't know. I just, like I said, going back 1978, 79, you could not have told me. You could not, you know, I was doing some community radio around 2002. And when the buildup for Iraq was taking place. And of course, the vice president at the time was one of five senators who had voted against a resolution. It wasn't even a law, it was just a resolution saying that South Africa, Mandela should be released. And he was like, nah, you know, but yet, and after this great performance prior to 9/11, you know, these cats are allowed to go into Iraq and talk about freedom and we're talking about, hey, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for the service. We appreciate it, you know. Yeah. It's up is down, good is bad.
That's right. That's right.
And,
that's so right.
And we won't talk about King in church or anywhere else, is certainly not in church, talk about his views on war in Vietnam.
Right. No, it's real.
Mhm. You got some material for us, man? Did you bring anything? Any poetry?
I always got something.
Yeah, why don't you
Yeah.
share a few things with us?
I'll share this one poem. This is a poem for Langston Hughes, actually. It's called Blacklisted at Birth. It's in the newest book here. And it's, I have a subtitle for it. It's called Langston Hughes Before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Are you now, or have you ever been, a member of the Communist Party? They asked, and asked again, of the most famous Black poet in the world from Kansas, in an America before Brown versus Board of Ed, summoned to Congress to give a kind of command performance by politicians who make the laws that made his citizenship into a mocking cynicism. Interrogated by the very men that schooled Hitler, them that spoke fluent Nazi, Libertat als Rat, a slight paraphrase of the old American proverb, the only good nigga is a dead nigga. Was it swastikas he saw circling in their irises, or were the whites of their eyes enough to clarify their intent? Hell-bent as they were to make him recant his work, to renounce the Renaissance he helped rot from his brownstone in Harlem, an interrogation that became some kind of extraordinary rendition, choke back his words or face social death. Surely he must have recalled how they revoked the passport of his friend a few years before. Did he then wonder if he'd need to go into hiding like Neruda did when they outlawed communism in Chile in 1948? Maybe he saw them bash in his head and knock out his teeth and arrest him for inciting a riot via a poem, like they would do a later poet in 1967 Newark. Or perhaps he saw them cutting off his fingers and laughing as he bled, like Pinochet did to the poet Victor Jara in 1972, before assassinating him in front of a stadium of thousands that would share his fate. But then he must have seen the pictures of the Africans who sat behind their severed hands in shock on rubber plantations, punitive damages for not bringing in the daily yield in King Leopold's Congo. Were these workers communists too? But this poet was made to suffer through these unintelligent interrogators, frisking his verses for signs of treason, as they butchered his words to make the claim that they lacked the appropriate measure of patriotism. He knew there was no explaining to his work to men who had no appreciation for the varieties of speech, of similes or subtleties of discourse, of irony or hyperbole, not to mention satire. For them, language was a blunt force, used only to bark commands and bludgeon judgments, dumbfounded as they were to understand why a Black man would ever consider another economic system better than the one that placed his grandmother in chains, sold his pa down the river, and keeps him working in the same fields under threat of lynching while telling him that he's free. Did they really think he needed some Russian to tell him that being called a boy was not a term of endearment, when his poetry had already made the point? For him, America was all but a bloody, stubborn metaphor. He knew that he and his people were capitalism's necessary curse. There was no need to be concerned for being red-baited when he was already blacklisted at birth.
Mm.
Thanks.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. I
Awesome,
wrote that,
man.
you know,
Wow.
as we've been discussing, you know, as I've been saying, just my learning and my development on these questions. And then, you know, someone who certainly loves Langston and his own journey and his own, involvement with the Communist Party at the time. I don't see a lot of work, written about that. And that was the impetus for me to describe my
Was that a reference to Robeson?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, okay.
Yes, his friend. That's right.
Yeah, and so another, he died in Philadelphia.
Yes. That's right.
That's why I said, man, the city doesn't really deserve you, or so Ursula and so many others who
That's right,
have
man.
come to
Honestly.
Lamar. I don't know if you know Lamar Manson, Black Ice, they call it. It's just, we would rather have Rocky. We would rather have Rocky.
The Rocky statue, yes.
So,
a fictional character, yes.
So go ahead, man. Keep it moving.
All right, so this is, I'll read the title poem to the book. It's called Black Phoenix Uprising. They call us magic when it's just us being who we are, scarred and black. We are resilient as sun rays, no way to comprehend it, so we name it as God, yet we are the holy without the ghost. The evidence of things unseen, the spirit within us has no need to haunt. Black vortex of the inexplicable, the word made flesh. Enchantments of the divine, we speak in tongues native and colonized still, conjure the force of creation. Like volcanoes erupting, we enunciate new worlds into being and name them all freedom. Ancient as the pyramids. When we congregate, we come together not just to remember, but to resurrect the dead. We, the progeny of those that dared be free, who've been to hell and came back smiling through bloody teeth. Black Phoenix Uprising. We are an insurrection of fire, reborn from the bone embers of our ancestors, of righteous indignation igniting revolt in the minds of the assassinated, dynamite exploding from our mouths, heat hollering past hotness burning like the North Star. Though some of us were once tarred and feathered, we've been known to fly. Our wings span centuries. Talk to me of love, personified, of a million Black souls reincarnated into the backbones of our sons and daughters, their freedom dreams etched into our genes, forged from centuries of revolt, a cauldron of liquid fire poured like a shaman's rum into these charmed skins, epidermis of steel, melanated mutations, trauma alchemized to genius. Our badassness been long archived. No need for every episode to be televised. Our revolution be satellite beamed from our eyes, bright as liberation yearning, smoldering a beauty that would leave the world blind. We are root connected by the solder of Ogun, beating life from his blacksmith's hammer on the anvil of our hearts conjoined, bleeding like lava. No matter where in this world our Blackness is common cause, is kin that goes deeper than this skin, mood, always vicarious. Maybe that's the reason why we often cry without knowing why, or when we deja vu in blue, every step taken in kind. This, the collective conscious of the wretched, the damnation of the yet vexed. Whatever justice there is in this world comes from the kerosene flame burning within us, comes from our conviction, like the match that strikes, the match that lights, the match that ignites our will to remake this world, like we remake ourselves, African again. Before the English, the Spanish, the Dutch, the German, the French, and the Portuguese, before we were chained in those ships, before Leo Africanus, when what we knew ourselves to be was the genesis of humanity, that indigenous spark that will remake this world. They say that we are magic, but that is just us being ourselves, scarred and black. We are resilient as the sun rising. No way to comprehend it, so we name it God.
Here you go. Amazing. And I have a radio, I do music, radio station thing. And there's a song that Amiri does with Murray. What is Murray's first name? Not Donald. He's a saxophonist.
Yes.
And Amiri does the poetry, the song, and he says, Africa, the inventor of the human being,
Yeah.
This is just You are. You just thanks, man. Great
Yes.
stuff. Where can people find your poetry, your work, your books?
Yeah, my website is my last name, osayande.org. And that's where all my stuff is found.
Yeah. And I'm going to get right over there when I get off. But again, thanks so much, man. We'll have to do
Rob,
this
thank
sometime
you.
again. And
Absolutely.
where are you now? You're
I'm in Maryland actually
in
now.
Maryland. Yeah. Well, we'll
Yeah.
stay in touch.
Yes.
You know,
Yes,
definitely.
please.
All right,
Indeed.
man. Thanks so much.
Always.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Take care.
Peace.